For reasons that will become apparent very shortly, for today's video we wanted a slightly different feel, so I'm not in the studio. We wanted something at least slightly comforting because today's video will be discussing the intersection of electric vehicles and terrorism. It's going to be discussing multiple distinct news stories that have happened recently, and consequently today's video comes with an appropriate content warning. If you're affected by any of the topics featured in today's video, we've left some links below that we hope you will find useful. We also want to make it very clear that we do not condone any form of terrorism and request that you, like us, spend some time reflecting on those who died or were injured as a consequence of these attacks, as well as the impacts on their families. Over the holiday period in the US, specifically on New Year's, many of us heard the horrifying news of the two attacks that took place in the US. These attacks were perpetrated by former and current service personnel. As is often the case with breaking news stories, initial reports were hazy, unclear, and exactly what you understood of what had happened was likely influenced by your media outlet of choice, the place you prefer to get information from. And like many of us these days, I'm sure many of you spent time looking for different sources of coverage. You try and get as comprehensive an understanding of what is going on as possible. But even doing that, things remained unclear for some time. What did become clear pretty quickly was the basic outline of what had happened. Rented electric pickup trucks were used in two different locations to carry out domestic terrorist attacks. The 10,000-foot view, the why, was as it always is. The individuals doing it wanted to cause damage and fear. That's what all terrorists do, be they the kind that blow things up, the kind that walk into a club or a church with a gun, or the kind that stoke hatred and division, propagating and promulgating the very worst of humanity. They want to make people feel afraid to go about their everyday lives because something bad might happen. But what we haven't seen people talk about, at least not to our knowledge, is the matter of why both attackers chose electric pickup trucks. We obviously do not have any more information to go on than is out in the public domain, but we do have decades of experience in covering EVs, and given that, we have theories about why the attackers chose to use EVs. There's also the questions of what the impacts are of that going forwards and how you can avoid your vehicle being used in an attack. Okay, so let's talk about what happened first. On New Year's Day, in what at the time of writing appear to be two unrelated attacks, which just have some unfortunate coincidental similarities, there were two terrorist attacks in the United States. In one, in New Orleans, Louisiana, a US-born citizen, and I'm saying that explicitly because I've seen our comment section, chose to use a rented Ford F-150 Lightning XLT to murder New Year's revelers in the street. Navigating around barricades and police officers, the attacker deliberately ran the vehicle into a crowd, killing 14 and injuring dozens more. Inside the vehicle, alongside other weapons, police found improvised explosive devices, which it appears he did not have the opportunity to deploy before being shot and killed by responding police officers. In the other attack, outside a hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, another US-born citizen chose to attempt to explode a Tesla Cybertruck outside the entrance foyer. In this instance, the explosion thankfully caused only minor injuries and almost no damage to the structure of the building. Many EV owners and fans and members of our own team have noted that the structure of the Cybertruck is such that it tends to resist outward movement of its sides, resulting in the force of these explosions in the bed pushing upwards rather than outwards. In that second incident, it seems pretty clear that the attacker was attempting to use the vehicle as an improvised explosive device, or IED, presumably also hoping that the large traction battery would ignite, which at present it doesn't seem like it did. Kudos to Tesla for their engineering. And as for the similarities, both attackers chose to rent their vehicles from Turo, and obviously both chose EVs, and it appears they both attempted to make them into IEDs, absolutely without minimizing the harm that they did cause. I suspect that in neither case was the attack as effective as the attacker may have hoped, given the other weapons and explosives carried in one, and the location of the attack in the other. Both of the attackers were, or had been, members of the US military. The attacker using the Cybertruck was a highly decorated Green Beret, an Army Special Forces Operations Master Sergeant, who was on leave. And the other, an Army veteran who'd worked in human resources and information technology, including a brief non-combatant stint in Afghanistan, and who held the rank of Staff Sergeant in the Army Reserve at the end of his service. Again, at the time of writing, it does not look like they knew each other. And then there's the differences between them. The attacker driving the Cybertruck, it appears, was, confusingly, a huge fan of the president-elect, and also of Tesla's current CEO. He left notes which indicate his belief that the country needs to rally behind the incoming administration and be supportive of Tesla's leadership and its CEO, both at Tesla and in his newfound political career. In contrast, the attacker in New Orleans flew an ISIS flag. Okay, so that's the what of what happened, and a little tiny bit of the why. But the question we're going to look at right now is, why did both attackers choose to use electric vehicles? And here we are very much into the realm of speculation. At the time of writing this, only the attacker in the Cybertruck indicated anything in his motives that make the decision to make a Cybertruck the vehicle of choice make any kind of sense, in as far as any terrorist attack makes any kind of sense. And that is that he wanted to create a spectacle. And the Cybertruck adds to that spectacle. And at this point we, and I do mean we as in the entire team at Transport Evolved, we have discussed this extensively, and this is from all of us. We need to be explicit in our coverage to the point of bluntly stating a few things very, very clearly. That's because Tesla's CEO is now threatening legal action against any news outlet that covers this news in a way that he does not like. Since this channel is run by a team of folk he definitely and explicitly and vocally does not like, we are here going to be equally explicit. Our discussion of these attacks does not in any way imply or suggest that the Tesla Cybertruck is somehow a lesser vehicle because of its involvement in these attacks. Nor are we suggesting that the Tesla Cybertruck was at fault or a cause for the explosion. Nor are we suggesting that as a Tesla it is somehow more likely to be an effective IED. For the record, Tesla, like many automakers, goes to great lengths to ensure its battery packs are as mechanically and electrically stable as possible. However, just like a tank of gasoline can explode under the right induced environment, so too can a lithium-ion battery pack catch fire if exposed to the right induced environment. And, if I'm brutally honest, the mainstream media's breathless and endless reporting on every EV fire may well have played a part here. EV fires get a lot of coverage, not ironically because they're reliably worse than gasoline car fires, nor because they're more frequent. Because in actuality, EV fires are vastly rarer than gasoline car fires. Mainly, it seems it's because the mainstream media is very excited about the unicorn sighting and the clicks they can garner from such reporting. Yes, if the traction battery does ignite, then the fire will burn longer and hotter, and may reignite later if the vehicle is improperly stored after the fire. But also, while a burning gasoline vehicle can lead to flash fires, or even rarely to explosions, EV fires are incredibly unlikely to do that. And it's quite a lot of work to get an EV traction battery to catch fire. They have to be pretty badly abused to do so, and manufacturers have gone to significant lengths to make them difficult to ignite. But regardless, and without getting into too much speculation on what's going on in the mind of someone who chooses to do something like this, It's possible that the extra coverage that may have been presumed to come out of the fact that it was an EV-involved terrorist event may have encouraged that selection. And the misreporting over fire risk and the difficulty of fighting EV fires may have also factored into that selection. Because yes, fighting EV fires is different from fighting gasoline fires, and like any new thing in the world, it requires training. It also is much easier with appropriate specialized equipment. We have a whole video on it, although honestly it's probably coming up to time to re-up that video because it's a couple of years old, and you should let us know if you'd like us to do that in Patreon or on Discord. Also, things like the reporting around Ukrainian forces using EV components and indeed e-scooters in the ongoing war may have added to the perception that EVs and their components can be used as a weapon, which, like basically anything in existence, in the right, or perhaps the wrong circumstances, is true. As to why the attackers chose trucks, well, in the case of the Cybertruck, as I mentioned, it seems there was a degree of wanting the spectacle. And also, a truck, in terms of carrying a large amount of explosive material in a vehicle one might, in the US at least, reasonably expect to pull up outside a hotel, well, a pickup truck with a covered bed would otherwise be fairly unremarkable in that situation. In the case of the attacker in New Orleans, we know that the higher front end heights dramatically increase the probability of death for those hit by a vehicle. The recent IIHS study demonstrated that for a median height car, as opposed to an SUV or pickup, at 35 miles an hour, the risk of serious injury to a pedestrian is 52%. When a median height pickup is involved, the likelihood of serious injury jumps to 91%. If your aim is to inflict as much suffering, pain and death as possible, then the vehicle with the highest front end is the one that's going to give you that result. Okay, so then there's the question of, well, what can be done to reduce the potential harm from individuals using EVs as weapons? The development of enhanced pedestrian safety systems that integrate with automatic emergency braking systems are a band-aid on the risks created by larger vehicles, and something that is at least increasingly being mandated across the world. It's also something that, hopefully, when more fully implemented, would reduce the ability of an individual to choose to drive a vehicle through a crowd or group of people. Although, as we've seen before with semi-autonomous systems, the ability of these systems to successfully identify vulnerable road users, those using assistive devices like wheelchairs, canes or walkers, and to identify visible minorities or even just to identify road users riding bicycles and the like, has been historically, shall we say, not good. So making sure automatic emergency braking systems actually do that for all kinds of people, well, it's kind of important. The NHTSA had proposed rules which would have required pedestrian safety tests to, at long last, be somewhat integrated into the rules for vehicle construction in the US, which by extension would have probably dragged those same rules into effect for Canada. Of course, with the change in administration, that situation is, shall we say, it's in flux. I still hope to see the rules go into effect, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Okay, and what about the use of vehicles as IEDs? Well, although it's clear that in neither case did the traction battery actually catch fire, despite the apparent plans of the attackers, that potential does exist. And one thing that is happening that will continue to reduce the harm from vehicles used as weapons in this manner is the improvement in fire protection for EVs. Unlike gasoline vehicles, which are required to carry a large volume of potentially explosive fuel, EVs are increasingly switching either to battery chemistries like lithium iron phosphate, which simply don't burn near as well, or to solid-state batteries, which really don't burn at all in any meaningful sense, or, as we've seen with recent developments in NMC chemistry batteries, the use of fire retardant separators. These shifts will make vehicles less likely to catch fire in a significant way, making them less effective as IEDs. And obviously, the other thing that's important is firefighters gaining training and experience with fighting EV fires. Thankfully, despite the popular notion that these fires are impossible to deal with, they actually aren't. Indeed, the Cybertruck fire, which, to be tediously clear again so we don't get sued, did not, as far as we can tell, involve the traction battery, was in part controlled using a SUV-sized electric vehicle fire blanket, a technology that we've covered before, which helps restrict the damage caused by an EV fire and also helps with extinguishing that fire promptly. Okay, so that's all well and good, but a lot of that stuff is for the future. Is there anything we can personally do right now? Well, that's challenging. If you're renting your vehicle out using Turo or a similar peer-to-peer car service, we'd suggest you maybe don't. While nothing so far indicates that these individuals would have had significant challenges getting a vehicle from a traditional rental company, if you don't want your own vehicle used in this type of attack, then making it unavailable is probably the only way to do that. And while neither of these vehicles was stolen, it's probably worth considering whether you want functions like auto unlock enabled, or whether you need to take steps to move your vehicle's keys away from the door to avoid relay attacks. Relay attacks, incidentally, are where a radio transmitter and receiver are used to make it seem like the key is next to, or even inside your car, when it's in reality still in your little pile of keys by the front door. They've been used to steal a wide variety of cars over the years, or indeed just to unlock them so people can steal parts. While, again, neither of the cars were stolen, vehicles have often been stolen for use in criminal activities, so, that's something you can think about. But yeah, we're unlikely ever to know for sure exactly why the attackers chose EVs. And depressing though the attacks are, there are things you can do to protect yourself from your vehicle being used in an attack like this. In all honesty, if EVs catch fire and burn really hot and are hard to put out was a factor in the reason that attackers chose them, then, well, let's just say I'm grateful for the design team's work in mitigating that risk, such that traction battery fires didn't happen. But as long as the media continue to exaggerate the risk of EV fires and automakers continue to design vehicles with massively high front ends, which serve nothing but looks, and as long as there are people hell-bent on causing destruction and death, then we will continue to see vehicles used as attack vectors. Minimizing the risk of yours being used that way and working for a better world in which people don't make these kinds of decisions, that's what we can all do right now. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure that we can be 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There's a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just under $11 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Steve Abernathy, Mike Nichols, Zach Kane, Philip Atkins, Kat, Rob Thomas, Ryan S. Laura, Jay Allor, Silla Gonzalez, France G. French, Nicole Huang, oh yeah, Pedro Huget, Darren Valentine, Winifred Galash, John Trindle, Sarah Hendricka Bickerton, Edward Krufka, Stephen Beatty, Jonathan Rees, Mia, Owen Patrick, and Gail Jackson. To join the list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your week of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. Address is also down below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store in the down below too. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you've subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we think this one is also well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving!